Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. Hello. Hi, June. Hi, Justin. Thanks, everyone, for waiting. We were just gathering our thoughts, making sure everything works for you all. Good to see you. Excellent. Hi, Greg. Hi, Jamie. All right. So we have a thought for you upon entering. Oh, this we were looking at some poor Kelsey ran her half marathon this weekend. I hope you don't mind me sharing that, Kelsey. So we were looking at some funny memes because unfortunately her boyfriend hurt his foot. So we're looking at that. All right. So today we are going to be talking about building readiness, and specifically, what does a strengths-based approach look like for readiness? And so the opening quote and question, the quote is from the National Implementation Research Network. And the quote is, readiness is not a pre-existing condition within a person, organization, or system. It has to be developed and cultivated. So my question to you is, how do you develop readiness through your SPDIG work? What does that look like? And Cipriano, is it okay if we mute you just for a second because there's a little bit of feedback?
Oh, yes, no problem.
Yeah, thank you. So, and folks can use their, I think, am I sharing my screen? Yes, I'm screen sharing. Okay, good. Folks can use your microphone or type away, whatever you'd like to do. I always like to hear your voices if you feel comfortable with that. Do you see? Congratulations for you, Kelsey. I hope you don't mind I shared. I forgot to ask before we started. Sorry about that.
No, not at all.
Okay, so building strong systems is one way to do support readiness. Amazing team collaboration, training, cultivating and nurturing relationships. Reviewing data and setting SMART goals. Okay, great. Thank you. So now it's time to introduce yourself again, probably best with the chat because we have enough of us that will work better. So if you could add your state, your role at the SPDIG, and what's the #1 barrier you are experiencing to creating readiness in your schools, districts, or early childhood programs, wherever you're working right now. What's the #1 barrier you're experiencing in creating readiness? And then what strengths do you see in those same programs, and how can you build on those strengths? So, I know it's kind of long, so whatever you want to touch on in the chat would be great. And we'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Okay, great. Thanks, folks, for adding. Time. Teacher time. Overwhelming desire to do what's best for students. That's really nice to see. Leadership changes. Time and availability. And of course, especially if you've been around for a while, that none of these are new barriers or strengths, but maybe a little more intense than they've ever been. Getting the right people at the table is a barrier. Coaching supports is a strength. Great. people wearing many hats. Yep. Staff involved are highly skilled, dedicated, and passionate about their work. Very good to hear as facilitator, right? A barrier establishing trust if folks have been historically marginalized. And strength is a process being used as working and seeing a shift in the direction people want to go. Everyone wants to do everything at one time to address all the needs. Moving on to crisis mode planning, preparing. These are great. Thank you so much. And we'll be collecting these and have them available. And I think we can look through trends and see how best we, SIG Network, can support you in these. It's also helpful for our speaker today, Cipriano. All right, news and notes. So just a reminder, if you hadn't already heard me talk about this or maybe saw an email and weren't sure what it meant, Denver University has a great program for school psychologists, and Kristen Brown of Colorado Department of Education, Colorado SPDIG connected us with them, and they do an internship that in program evaluation. And so they said, we can support it. It's really, these are smart, go-getting scholars, and they wanted to support us. And so one of the questions we've had in the past is, what kind of fidelity measures are being used across the projects? How are they being analyzed, and how is that data being used? And so, we can put together a pretty easy list, but this is going a little more in depth when it comes to use of fidelity measures. And so thanks for those of you who responded to the survey and said that they could look at your APR for that. We appreciate your consent. They will be doing a report out, and then I will make sure I share the data with everyone. The OSEP newsletter, please do subscribe if you don't already. Lots of good resources in there and information from OSEP. And then you can find today's webinar resources, the director's webinar, SIG Network, give it a day so we could have the recording there and the slides, all else. If you're interested in using shorthand to tell your story, we have the software available to you. It will be free to you, and Kelsey can support you, as well as shorthand. Actually, we have editorial support. So it's a great way if you're putting something together for your website, if you want a newsletter to send out. That's how Kelsey puts together our newsletter. Really, really nice program, and everyone who's been using it has enjoyed it. We have the program area meeting coming up in July, and our planning committee of the SPDIG projects has been hard at work. We have one evaluator, we have some other project staff. We got some feedback from the other evaluators about what they'd like to see. And so we're working off the idea so far of celebration. How do we celebrate our participants? How do we celebrate the hard work your staff are doing? How do we build on strengths via celebration? And just a reminder that our last director's webinar was on equity in recruitment and retention of personnel, if you want to go back and listen to that recording. And Kelsey, if you wouldn't mind putting that recording into the chat at some point, that would be great. All right, so today's topic is on building readiness, and I wanted to connect you with a few resources and some thinking before we introduce our speaker for today. So the Effective Implementation Cohort, that is a Gates Foundation project, and the National Implementation Research Network, NERN, is leading that effort. And they've developed some readiness indicators that relate to district teaming, executive sponsors, communication, fit and feasibility assessment, think the Hexagon tool, implementation planning, and measurement planning. So I recommend taking a look at it. They've really put things together quite nicely. They have images, they have descriptions of what each of these things mean, and it's in more plain language than maybe it's been in the past with implementation science. So I highly recommend that. We had, I think it's been 2 different interns at different times have worked on a research summary of teacher buy-in. How do you develop teacher buy-in, or also known as staff commitment? And what we found from looking at the research is that teachers are more likely to buy in or solidify commitment if administrators use data in their practices, if teachers, other educators, other personnel have a sense of control in the classroom practices, if teachers feel like they're included and integral to the school and the programming, There's transparency between the teachers, the principals, and the administration. The teachers' values and concerns are reflected in the framework being used. Think MTSS in this sense. If external expertise is brought in to provide adequate training, and students' academic achievement show better results. And so if these practices are implemented and consistent over a sustained period, you're of course more likely to have that commitment. So I wanted to center us in the research. And then today we'll be basing our conversation on the Native Connections Training and Technical Assistance Self-Assessment, which is a strengths-based look at the context. What's already there, what needs to be there in order for the sites you're working with to access the training, to use it well, and to develop capacity over time. And so it looks at infrastructure, staff hiring and training, identifying potential community stakeholders and advisory group membership. I know it's something that a lot of projects are thinking about right now for this PDIX. Community assessment and readiness, thinking about youth engagement and youth leadership development, developing strategic action plans, and implementation of best practices. So I'm going to stop sharing and introduce our speaker today. So Cipriano Lucario is currently on site. He is in depth in the work. And remind me where you are in the world today, Cipriano.
North Fork, California, a small tribal nation at the foothills of Yosemite.
Okay. Is it beautiful there today?
Unbelievable, especially for May weather in California.
I'm picturing it. I'm a little jealous, but I'm really glad you're there to do the work. And so Cipriano, some of you may have already met him because we have a working group on serving Native American students who have disabilities. And he trained us. We had a 2-day training, and he provided much of the training. It was a wonderful experience. And we're so lucky that he was able and wanted to come back and present to us today and share his knowledge. So I'm going to have him talk a little bit more about himself, but just a little bit of background. SAMHSA supports the Tribal Technical Assistance Center and has for a little while, and they are a contract with them. So they're not from the Department of Education, but kindly worked with us to get us up to speed. We had a lot of questions, a lot of needs about working with Indigenous youth, working with tribal nations and with communities, and they helped us with that. But through that work, I learned about this community assessment. And for the last year, or at least since last October, we've been thinking about how do we work with different groups from a strengths-based approach? How do we develop a relationship that's going to enable all the other things that we want to do and really get to the impact, get to the kind of help that we want to deliver? And so Cipriano is going to be sharing with us today some of what they've learned so far in using the community assessment, some of what other states are doing with it. He is also going to walk us through a vignette, and you're going to have breakout groups where you're going to be using your video and microphone to share with each other some thoughts about building readiness in a strengths-based approach. So please do be prepared for that. And then at the end of today, John Lind will be leading at you at that point. And at the end of today, he's going to be asking you to include a 3-2-1 in the chat. And so if you could be thinking throughout the presentation about 3 big ideas, 2 questions you still have, and 1 takeaway action, or sorry, 1 action that you will take as a result of what you learned today. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat, but I wanted to let you know that so you could be taking notes and be thinking about it throughout Cipriano's presentation and your breakouts, etc. So that's 3 big ideas, 2 questions that were raised for you or you still have, and 1 action that you'll take as a result of our time together today. So that I'm going to turn over to Cipriano and let him tell you a little bit more about himself and his work. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer and Kelsey. You guys are too kind to even invite me back. That last training was really tough. It was really interesting to kind of hear it. But I'm very thankful and appreciative for us to share what we feel is very important work for, the 573 federally recognized tribes, the hundreds of state recognized tribes that aren't even, and even the tribes that are no longer even recognized yet, still tribal nations. Many are across 34 states in the US, in 50 states. So I know your work, each and every one of your work is touching Indian country some way, somehow. And I just want to say thank you very much for your guys' contributions to wellness and academia. I'm a Navajo Indian and Sicilian on my father's side, so hence all the vowels in the name. Born and raised in San Francisco, California, and spent a lot of my summers on my reservation, Navajo reservation, right outside Gallup, New Mexico. For the last 10 years, I've been working in and out of Washington, D.C., and I had no idea about this contract work. Definitely didn't go to DC to be a Fed. I actually went for a nonprofit and realized the struggles of nonprofit, but it gave me an introduction into policy and it gave me an opportunity to learn about this whole field of training and technical assistance. And as an urban Indian who's really trying to understand how to contribute back to tribal Indian nations, this has really been a blessing. And I always tell my boss, this is my dream job. She undershoots that all the time. Can't believe that I found my dream job at such low pay. But the reality is service is a vital piece, and each and every one of us on this call here are providing service back to a community. So again, I just want to say thank you very much for that. Today's discussion is looking at community readiness, the community readiness model. And maybe, to keep this interactive, Jennifer, you're setting a new bar for me. You might be the most interactive agency I've worked with, and I love the 3-2-1. I'm going to harvest that for some of our webinars. But, thinking about the reactions button, if anybody can use their reactions button and just give a thumbs up if you have heard of the community readiness model. If you've heard of the model, click your thumbs up. Just give me a chance to understand where to begin. Thank you, Annette. If you could turn on your picture and give me a thumbs up, that'd be great. But it looks like just one, maybe two people. Selena, thank you. Tom, definitely. I know you're a big hitter in Indian country. And Jamie, thank you very much. Okay, so it sounds like a few of you have heard of the model. But for a lot of you, this is going to be maybe like an introduction to the model. So that gives me a starting point to begin. And also, I want to make sure that we're resource rich because once you hear the model and you think about the model, there might be some tribes you're connecting with and say, hey, there's resources out there. So first off, let's open up the vignette. And Kelsey, this is where I'm really going to lean on you, Kelsey. I put it in a Word document. I didn't know what's the best way. Should I just email it to you, or if I share my screen, will all the groups see my screen?
Sure. Yeah. If you're comfortable sharing your screen, I think everyone should be able to see your screen.
Okay. I am going to pull up this vignette. And as you can see here, it is in Word document. So I kept it as easy as possible. And I thank you, Jennifer, for giving me some wordsmithing just to make sure that the vignette is targeted to your arena that you're working in. Our TA Center is definitely dedicated to substance abuse prevention. I ground my work in a lot of prevention and wellness efforts, but we wanted to think about ways to kind of drive home the opportunities of understanding readiness in your work. So as you can see here, the vignette, you're connected with an administrator who's reviewing their literacy data and the discrepancies for children with disabilities or students of color. They understand what they are doing currently is not working and are anxious about making changes during COVID times. Now, as you can see here, this is the stages of change model. This is a model that came out of the substance abuse field, but it is a foundation for community readiness. And this model is a foundation for personal change in the substance abuse field. So pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance or relapse are processes of change within the substance abuse treatment field. And it's a foundation for thinking about a process for change in community. So your task with your small group with this vignette is what are the strategies or messaging you would provide to that administrator with that could be within each potential stage of readiness. And you could scratch this because this is where we wordsmith that, readiness. So for instance, if your administrator's in pre-contemplation, and this is a characteristic of pre-contemplation, what would be a messaging that you would provide that administrator in trying to get them to maybe consider changes to support the students with disabilities or the students of color? Contemplation characteristics. So Kelsey, I'll follow your lead. How do we want to do this? And you tell us.
To split folks into breakout rooms, or I
Yes.
can go ahead and open the rooms. I've got folks sorted into groups of about 4. Is that okay?
4, and maybe one person will report out on just maybe an area that they feel they would want to share, or a strong area.
Sounds good. And does anyone have any questions about the breakout activity? All right, sounds like we're ready.
Jennifer Johanna said hi. She had to get off, but she wanted to get on and just, be part of it for a little bit. She's so busy, but she still remembers all of it. So
People just want to be with us, even if they
Yeah.
don't have a spitting. That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you, Earl.
you're welcome.
So my husband is headed your way this weekend.
What's going on?
Well, he's going to Dayton. You're probably not in Dayton, but still, Ohio. His godson, our nephew's graduation from Dayton.
We're Dayton University of Dayton.
Mhm.
Great. I'm from Dayton. I lived right down the street from University of Dayton. That's great. Great school. Great school.
He's really enjoyed it. And now he's headed to New York City in finance. So soon he will be
Wow.
making more money than all of us combined. But you kind of have to live in New York City, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That and Columbus, Ohio.
Take your word for it. Yeah, Cipriano, actually, we were talking about Ohio. So
Good.
Yes, I am actually going to use a little bit from that state. I think that state is initiating one of the biggest community readiness assessment efforts. And I want to kind of blow up a little bit about what you guys are doing. Definitely not an Ohio State fan, so I'm glad that you are representing other schools.
It's first of all, it's the Ohio State. You have to remember.
No, but I want to do just a brief a chance. Is there anybody that would take a healthy risk and maybe just share 1 or 2 things that kind of came out of their small group discussion that might have surprised them, or in thinking about that vignette?
I'll go ahead and start. I'm not going to say it surprises anybody. I was with my own boss and Selena from Mississippi, and we both are doing early literacy. And quite honestly, we didn't have the format in front of us, but
Mhm.
we talked about the same thing. First of all, data is important. I know it's a 4-letter nasty word sometimes with people, but you got to look at data. You got to look at historical data. And also you got to be careful not to offend districts because they believe what they are doing is right, even though it may not be correct. So the data is very important. Building relationship is very important. And, we both, they're doing literacy in Mississippi as well as in Ohio. So we use, the inventory from the Michigan people a lot. And we try to look at that, but it's all that conversation, doesn't happen overnight. In Ohio, we have in our districts what they call the Ohio Improvement Process. So we have teacher-based teams, we have school-based teams, building-based teams, and we have district leadership teams. So that feedback is very important for planning. And again, it doesn't happen overnight, but you got to have conversation. You got to have shared leadership.
Mhm.
So Selena, is there anything else you want to add? Because I'll talk for another 20 minutes if you let me. So
No, I think you covered it. Good job, Earl. Earl was
Well, thank you.
voluntold by his boss. He was reporting out.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes. Anybody else like to take a healthy risk and just something that kind of jumped out or anything that you want to just acknowledge with the group?
Well, my group was really awesome in talking about data, but then also reframing the conversation in a really positive way. And saying that, instead of saying, oh, your numbers are low, framing it as an opportunity to maybe, look at your school district. Maybe you have a lot of first-year teachers in the elementary school, and this is your time to really build up a training and coaching plan for your district that can be used for more than just literacy. So yeah, that's what we talked about. It was a great conversation.
Wow, nice. I just really want to say thank you for Earl and Veronica for sharing. Two big things that you really hit on was relationships. One is vital, and I know that we don't have to create a personal relationship with everybody we're working, but what is a professional relationship? And how do we, translate? Because one thing I've learned in Washington, D.C., especially as being a Navajo Indian, is that every position, every federal administration has their own culture, their own lingo, their own, and it's all under the auspice of prevention. But Department of Justice prevention looks different than Indian Health Services prevention, which has a different definition or best practices of SAMHSA's prevention. So, when you're working with professions, especially in rural community, who is the expert? And for me, I know for my culture and where I'm coming from in this presentation, I have to be thoughtful about my lingo because my background is working specifically with tribes. And even in my vignette, I had to do a little bit of language with the group I had a chance to work with to kind of understand, where are we going with this conversation? And so, I just really think on that piece. And we also understand that change takes time. Behavior change takes time in my area of expertise, but changing a culture takes time. I mean, how many of us have said we're going to do something for a New Year's resolution and come February, that's out the window. I'm back to eating steaks and putting mayonnaise on my sandwiches, which I regret all the time. So in things like that, changing those behaviors take time. And so I love how you guys talk about data, and even in our group, the reflections of data. But I think in our small group, we really asked a question, and I almost let it slide, Sandra, but I really brought it back. And it's just like, what are we trying to change for? And is that a goal across the system? Because in certain professions, we uphold certain things of value higher than maybe the community or the culture we're working within. And especially and again, being Native American, data, I love how you said it, Earl, 4-letter word. Not everybody feels included in data sets that are used for system level change. And so, how do we deal with that when we're trying to change the culture of a community and people don't trust the goal, they don't trust the path, and they don't trust speaking up in those situations. And so, those are the things that we're working with when we think about it. And the community readiness model that we're going to be talking about has been vital to be thinking about this. I'll give you one example that the creators used when they thought about this. And again, it's based on Indian country. It's based on substance abuse because that's my area where I got introduced to it, but it makes complete sense. When a tribe received a grant, let's say for $50,000 for meth treatment, the number one thing they did was hire a substance abuse counselor. Well, if the community is in denial that substance abuse is even an issue, what happens to that office? It stays empty for 50 weeks out of the year. Is that an effective use of $50,000 to address methamphetamines, which is not a lot of money anyway? So it really spurred people to think about, are we maximizing the use of these federal resources, and are these resources matched to actually working within the culture that they are being provided for? And that's what created the community readiness model thinking, was how can we start to match our actions to the level of readiness that the community is at? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be flipping around a couple of different websites. I will make sure that Jennifer has a link to all the websites that we use. I also have the manual from the Tri-Ethnic Colorado University, which is the manual. And SAMHSA has also revised this manual a couple times because it's widely used now for strategic planning in Indian country. And then I want to provide a little You're Worthy state to the state of Ohio, because they are using this on a statewide level, and they are starting to develop readiness scores and using those assessment scores to actually try to change the culture within the areas that they are targeting. And I really want to give props to the state of Ohio in this, because there's no other really state I think that is actually kind of doing it on this scale, and they're starting to really match those action steps to the level of readiness the community is at in order to create those changes. Another thing I will say, Jennifer, as I share my screen, I'm not going to be able to see questions, but I really, the same as last time, as a facilitator, please ask questions when they come up. I'm not a big fan of the whole Q&A at the end because we lose our train of thought, our thought process. So as questions come up, Jennifer, I'm not going to just jump right in.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just more interesting that way. And just a heads up to everyone, I mentioned something about this at the beginning, but John Lind, who Cipriano, you've met before in the training and is part of the SIG network, will be taking over my position at about 4.
Okay.
And we'll take you out till 4:30.
Perfect. So John, same thing. Just please just jump right in and say, hey, Cipriano, question.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, you guys should see a PowerPoint slide.
We see it. Looks great.
Perfect. You know, SAMHSA and the feds, a little disclaimer. So just, I'm going to put this up just so you guys know this is a disclaimer. We are a contract agency doing this work on behalf of SAMHSA. And this is my contracting officers within SAMHSA. So if you happen to know Maureen Madison, I know it's a big world out there, but she is just awesome. And just give her much thanks, and John Dunbar Cooper as well. Now, this is the first level of resources for you guys. If you're working with tribes or organizations or communities, RTA Center does not have to work specifically with tribes, hence connections with Jennifer. We provide a lot of trainings to states and other federal agencies. This is the links that you would have here, kind of looking at it. But a lot of my lessons come out of the Tribal TTA Center. The SAMHSA programs is just a website full of other programs. We are just one. When I Googled the definition, and just kind of thinking about, where you guys are at with your knowledge base, these are some of the definitions that come up for community readiness and these websites. And when you look at these kind of definitions, it's very empowering. It feels like this is an end-all be-all tool because the one beauty part about this tool is it's simple, it's low tech. It could be done in rural communities with just a boost of capacity and training. And it really provides an opportunity for long-term action steps. And this is why it's really resonating with Indian country, because Indian country doesn't always have the resources that states or large organizations might have. You might have 1 or 2 people that are actually doing some kind of strategic planning. And so they're really resonating with this tool. But in the end, you see this definition by Colorado State, and it's really, this tool is really geared towards, sorry about that. This tool is really looking at trying to create more successful efforts to address a variety of issues, and such as alcohol, drug, and HIV. Some of the because there was so much fear out of HIV and AIDS in the 80s. This curriculum was dedicated or really built and had a chance to move forward in the mid 90s. And it really looked at the unknown of the AIDS virus in the early 80s, the fear, the stigma that it created. And it took years for research and data to catch up to destigmatize AIDS. And we're still dealing with the stigma of HIV. Yet, we have all this data. So maybe, is it the chicken or the egg when it comes to data that it really shows opportunities to address it? But most important is with this tool, it's a tool that looks at to engage the community to address the challenges that are identified. Community readiness can be issue specific. Just like I said, community readiness can vary across dimensions. We'll review the 6 dimensions looking at community readiness. It could vary across segments of the community, and understanding community readiness, at least in my area and field, is essential knowledge for addressing an issue. These are the 6 dimensions within the community readiness. And I'm going to, after this PowerPoint, I'm going to kind of jump into the toolkit and we'll define these a little bit more because for whatever reason, I had a bunch of notes that outline the definition, but they're not coming up here. So these are the 6 dimensions, looking at community efforts, what are currently going on in the community to address these, community knowledge of the efforts. Sometimes our prevention programs, our treatment programs, your school-based services are doing a lot of different efforts to change the culture, yet does the community understand those efforts? Where do they go to get those connections or resources? Where do they get the trainings? Even thinking about the school teachers, are they aware of all the trainings that are available to help them enhance their daily schedules or the things that teachers or administrators might do to change the culture of academia in order to support those students who are struggling? Leadership, community climate, community knowledge of the issue, and resources related. These are the stages of readiness. Now, when I'll go through the scoring, I'll show you some scores, and then we're going to look at the Ohio State's effort around community readiness, and you're going to see where the scores of the assessment fall within this scale. The first scale, no awareness, denial resistance, vague awareness, all the way up to professionalization, that policies, procedures, processes, third-party billing efforts are created to address the particular challenge going on in the community. These give you a little bit the lowest levels. Obviously, no awareness, the issue is not generally recognized by the community. Denial resistance. So as you can see here, these are the definitions of some of those levels within the state, within its different stages. And you are going to see these within the state of Ohio's processes as they did their community readiness. Some of their scores have fell within the pre-planning to vague awareness to even denial that the particular challenges are existing. And what's beautiful about this particular curriculum is it has best practices and opportunities for a community or a culture to raise their level of awareness or readiness within the curriculum. So once the scoring is done, you take a look at your score and it actually has some action steps to help whatever organization is trying to raise their level of readiness. And that is incredibly helpful for strategic planning, community mobilization, creating change in the community, creating change within individuals. Why we use the CRM, and I think that this is some of the most important pieces that I've learned, at least in my area of expertise, which is tribal nations and creating community of change. Tribes, we don't have a lot of resources like maybe some of the states that you work with or some of the departments you work within the states. So the model is efficient, it's inexpensive, and it's easy to use. The curriculum is online. In our TA Center, we do a lot of trainings with tribes to actually walk through the curriculum, practice the scoring, review the scoring, and then actually do teach backs and didactic training on what their score means to the group and how they can interpret those action steps to raise the level of readiness within their particular tribal nation or community. But what it does is it creates community recognition and ownership of challenges, and it has the strategies built within it that are culturally congruent for any communities or organizations to cover. Now, I know that this model might not have the language that directly connects to the type of work that you guys are doing, even in our breakout room. I heard about sometimes you guys are levels removed from even working with administrators. Yet this can be a valuable resource when those individuals you're working with are considering change and don't know where to start. Because again, change is complex, it takes time, yet this model allows the implementers to think about what is the community vision or help to change. And it kind of goes back to the question that we heard in our small group: what are we changing for? And so, where do you begin? Again, I'm in the behavioral health field, and in tribal nations, and some of the communities we work with that have high levels of trauma. Some of the community norms are desensitized to particular challenges that are impacting families. They hold secrets. They don't want to share what's going on, and there's no trust. So where do you begin when you think about creating a culture or change or a community vision if those are the community norms? So what I'm going to do here is stop sharing here. That's kind of some foundational pieces. Let me go back here. Stop sharing. Perfect. And now what I'm going to do is share my screen here. Go here. And if I am not mistaken, you guys should see a website. And then here, move this over here. Okay, perfect. Now, if I'm not mistaken, do you guys see a PDF?
Yes.
Perfect. So this is the Community Readiness Toolkit that is online. And this gives you kind of a breakdown of what it's really looking at. It's trying to measure the attitudes, knowledge, efforts, and activities and current resources between community members and leadership in order to assess these 5 issues. Now, I know that there's going to be some translation for you guys in regards to how this could be used, yet these are the key components. This is kind of the foundational pieces. There's survey questions that are embedded in the process. You interview key respondents to using the survey. You score the survey. You calculate the readiness scores across the 6 dimensions, even though this says 5, there's actually 6. And you use the final readiness scores to develop the action plan. Simple, low tech, low cost. Again, this is exactly where I got my idea for the vignette, so you could see how it directly relates. And it really starts to talk about it. Now, what I'm going to do is scroll down here to the survey questions. Now, there's an important piece that I want to identify, is this piece right here. Step 2, and I think that this is a vital piece, and this is where I want to come back to this idea and understanding when we look at the state of Ohio. Here is, when we think about this for our work in working with tribal nations and thinking about changing the community climate, we have to identify who is the community. And I think that this is for you, for your team, and for each of the work that you do when you present this as a resource, if you're working with the state or you're working with a big organization, and goes back to that commission, what are we changing for? Who is the community that we're actually working with? Because if you are not careful implementing this readiness model, the people you interview can actually impact the level of readiness score you have. I'll give you an example. If I was working for a tribe and I wanted to kind of address the substance abuse challenges, which again is kind of my expertise and what I use it for. Is it important that I interview the substance abuse counselor, the tribal leadership, and the social workers? who are aware of all of the programs of the services, or is it important for me to identify community members who might be engaged in the services to get a true understanding of what the community knowledge is about the particular challenge, what the resources are, or the community climate. So again, who you interview, who you define as the community will impact your readiness scores. And I think that that's a very important piece. And these are just some examples of who the community member is. And we'll come back to this because in the state of Ohio, they are implementing the community readiness assessment model, and different counties have taken different approaches on who they're interviewing. And we could see some scores that could be elevated because of the community members that they decided to interview. All right, so as you could see here, identify the issue. These are all going to be activities and steps. And again, we have a great example of the state of Ohio when they did a lot of work identifying the issue. They proposed the issue, they identified and worked with identifying the community. They really followed this format to a T, so it's going to be a great example for us to kind of look at to see what can be done on the state level. Prepare your interview questions. As you can see here, it even gives you a chance, because one of the things that this model really tries to have people not do is to synthesize or kind of, when you do the note taking, don't, put your thought in it. You want to record what what the person being interviewed is actually saying to get that accurate representation. So as you can see here, it walks step by step. Choosing your key respondents, it goes through here, and then when I get down here, you're going to see the questions. So here's the sectors. Again, state of Ohio did a good job. Let me just scroll down a little faster here just to save time. Okay, so again, it gives you everything about the interview process for scoring. Okay, so let me jump over real quick. I'm going to use one more website that does a really good job in this. And if I'm not mistaken, you should be able to see a second website that says Community Toolbox. Is that correct?
Yeah, it looks great.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, if you guys are unaware of this, this is what I think I want to say Kansas University basically PDF'd a college textbook. And as you could see here, chapter 2 sections, these are all tools for community mobilization, community asset mapping, really thinking about how to change the culture within, or the climate within a community, and community readiness is here. So this is a great resource, and I think, for you that are working, for you on the call who are working definitely with smaller or rural communities, a lot of these might be really good resources for your toolbox as you reach out to the community. But as you can see here, it breaks down what is community readiness, the model. Here's the 6 dimensions that are embedded within the survey questions. So I'll make sure I'm accurate on my time. And as you could see here, as you scroll down here, these are the questions. And in this assessment model right here, A and B are the same. So these are the questions you would be interviewing. How long have these efforts been going on in the community? That is for score A. Using a scale from 1 to 10, how aware are people in your community of these efforts? So these are questions that are looking at the community climate and community resources. As you scroll down here, see these are leadership. Who are the leaders specific to the issue? Scale of 1 to 10. How concerned is this issue to your leadership? How are these leaders involved in the efforts? Community climate, knowledge of the issue, and prevention resources. Now, this interview would probably take about 60 to 90 minutes, and then you would choose 2 people neutral that did not do the interview to score the assessment. So as you can see here, this website goes right into scoring the assessment. It gives you the scoring sheet, it gives you the dimensions, and it walks you through the process of developing the average score out of the 6 dimensions. And then this is where the real beauty part of it is for this particular model, that if the organization has no awareness that the particular challenges are going on, there's no reason to do big events. So the action steps would be these one-on-one contacts with community members, visit existing and established small groups to inform them of the issue, these one-on-one phone calls. If the organization or community is in vague awareness, these are areas where maybe a social marketing plan would be created to start building on that awareness, to understand or break down or raise awareness of the particular issues by posters, flyers, billboards, potlucks, community gatherings, social gatherings. But if your score is higher for a particular level of readiness, then maybe you're in the preparation phase. And so school drug surveys might be in, conduct community surveys. If you're in stabilization, that they know these challenges are going on and they have things to address it, then these community events are going on. There's training for community professionals. There's quarterly meetings happening. So as you could see here, these action steps are built within the model. So what I'm going to do here is I'll make sure that you guys have this resource here as well as the handbook, but I'm going to jump over here and I just want to say a quick check. Do you guys see the sub-recipients map for the Ohio SPIF?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So the state of Ohio is implementing this SPIF framework across the counties of Ohio. And Wayne County, and they're really targeting, if I'm not mistaken, and Earl, I know you guys probably have much more greater understanding. So if I misquote anything, please correct me, because I'm really learning this myself, and I'm very excited about this work. But I think what the state of Ohio is doing is quite unique. So you could click on, let's just look at Wayne County. And as this page opens up, you'll see this is part of how they're connected to this statewide SPIF framework. Here's the interviews. They did a county strategic plan. They did webinars to get the information out, their social marketing campaign. But if you could see here, Community Readiness Assessment Report. And as I learned this and I started opening this up, I started realizing that they're implementing these community readiness assessments across their counties. Here they give a background of the tri-ethnic community readiness model. You could see that they're gathering information and resources from SAMHSA as a federal agency, and they break down the dimensions in the way that they see it. Now, I thought that this is cool that they actually put in, some examples of quotes of things around those stages, again, to inform the people who are reading this report, some background issues. And as you can see here, identifying the problem, defining the community, conducting and recording structured interviews with key respondents, the transcripts, the scoring, and then creating a report. Awesome. They followed it to a T, and this is where they selected their process. And for here, they were looking at underage drinking and prescription drug use and misuse among people. They did the key informant interviews. They did community readiness. Here's their interviews. And it gets down to their problem statement and their scores. This is where they selected their representatives, the date that they did the interviews, members of the faith-based community, school and education providers, prevention and treatment. So a good section of the community, maybe a couple community members, which I think is awesome. The people that are navigating the services. And then these are their readiness scores. So in the community knowledge and efforts, they scored collectively a 30.5, leadership 35.5, And then they calculated the score, the stage scores here, and the overall is 4.1. So in their underage drinking efforts, they feel from their assessment score that they are in the pre-planning phase. And using that pre-planning phase, this is some of the quotes that they have from their interviews, identifying different areas of conversations they had within this effort. And they wove that into their report, and then they used the assessments to develop strategies to build readiness to address it. So you could see here, after reviewing the SALTs and most dimensions, they were really looking at kind of community engagement and developing some awareness efforts and outreach efforts to help the community understand how big the challenge is, and to focus in detail on improving the community readiness to address the underage drinking. A great example of what they've been able to do in Wayne County. Let me just see here. Very interesting and useful. Thank you, Patty, for that feedback. And so, as you could see here, the state of Ohio is really kind of using this model, this low-tech model, this low-cost model, in order to find ways to understand their readiness. I'm just going to go to Mercer County again. Here's the prevention framework, a lot of resources. Here it is, community readiness assessment as a process. And I'm just going to go ahead and scroll down to the actual results so you could see how this model is impacting the development of strategies for these counties to start addressing some of these efforts. And so here's who they interviewed: members of the faith-based community, school and educators, local elected officials. They came up with their individual dimensions, and their score is 2.83 across those dimensions. And so they categorized in the areas of denial and resistance. So for them, they used that score. These are some quotes that came out of their interviews that helped them understand where they fell within each of those dimensions. And then they used those scores to develop action steps or an action plan to address it. Earl, I know you're on the call, and there might be a couple other Ohio representatives on the call. Is there any feedback, or seeing this, anything that you would like to share with the group just on your guys' thought about how this model has been used?
Well, I'm not aware of it. So this was very interesting, but, all counties have their own situation and dealing with things. And so it's very interesting how they're addressing it. And the big thing is now, what are they going to be able to do? So obviously there's some situations in those counties that they want to engage the community in, and that's great because, sometimes there's violence, those kind of things that are happening in counties as well. As you said, underage drinking, it just could be a number of things. So, but it looks like the tools, and looks like Ohio is really engaged in the communities, getting together and helping, which is very important, and communicating with them. So we thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there anybody else in Ohio on the call that you'd like to share something? No, you got, okay.
No, my boss was on it, but she had to leave. So
okay. So as you guys could see here, this is a low tech. It's a simple. You interview no more than 10 people. Now, some people will say that's not a large number of people to get it, but I've worked with tribes who interviewed 30 to 40 people, and they compared it to their assessment of interviewing 8 people, and there was not much variation in the score. So, I think that really supports the rural communities in thinking about this as a tool, because that would be done. Another thing that I've seen that's been extremely helpful is this is something that you can train community members to implement the interviews. You can train community members to help with the scoring. So that alleviates maybe the rural areas or the frontier areas of the United States who don't have large prevention teams to expand and find an identified workforce that can contribute to mobilizing the community and helping kind of create those wellness efforts, prevention efforts, or community climate change hopes that they might have. One last piece that I think, for you guys as far as resources, knowing that you guys might feel you're removed from the actual trench work, yet I think just as important as me doing this work, having a backpack full of resources for organizations who might consider this as a change. Our organization really has understood the importance of this model. And if I'm not mistaken, this is our SAMHSA web page for tribal training and technical assistance. And our TA Center is just one of many within SAMHSA that provide training and technical assistance across a variety of different topics, mostly around substance abuse, behavioral health, but behavioral health really falls within everything. So, you might find, I love the English language because we could slice and dice words, right? Find ways to connect how a TA Center from SAMHSA could help. But if you went right here to this link right here, Tribal TTA Center webinars, we actually created a 3-part webinar series on wellness and capacity building. And right here, when you open this page, you will get a link to a 3-part webinar series looking at 1, reviewing the model, 2, scoring the model, and then 3, using the model to develop an action plan. So this could be a valuable resource for your school systems or your organizations that you are connecting with. Right here, community readiness and suicide prevention. Again, we know it's around the prevention topic, but the meat and potatoes of the model and the curriculum are within these 3-part series. So as you can see, it's a little under 4 hours. It's broken down into 3 sections, looking at understanding the model, reviewing how to score and develop the readiness score, and then developing that score into action steps to hopefully raise the level of readiness or move that organization, community, or culture to the next step. I know I am coming up on my time here. Is there any questions, comments that anybody might have? Nice, letting me off the hook easy. So, I just want to say that you would be surprised on how the concept of readiness is really growing. When I started to review this resource and developing resources for you guys all, I was actually introduced to understanding school readiness. And it was a blog that was created by a teacher that was engaging parents on the conversation of how do we prepare our young people for education? How do we get them ready for academia? And even in early childhood development, there's things that parents can do to promote and prepare their young person to be ready to harvest and gain knowledge through other adults, through communication, through other techniques, even before the school arena starts. So I really see this field of readiness moving forward. I do see the topic of readiness expanding. And Patty, I thank you for the question. Have you seen school and districts self-assess readiness for social emotional learning interventions? I believe that is starting to evolve really with smaller schools in rural areas where change might be a little easier than in big urban school districts that have maybe more leadership in the admin level versus maybe smaller schools where the teacher and the school staff are kind of the main change agents in that culture. I've seen tribal schools start to look at this and BIE schools start to look at this because the supports for tribal families is very different than maybe non-native kids. And so how do we engage extended family members using cultural modalities maybe even cultural healing modalities to help young people self-soothe and be prepared to kind of walk within those schools and not have some of those particular challenges happen. So, I do believe that that's happening, but on a smaller school, maybe in the rural and definitely within the tribal schools that we have been able to touch with. I hope that helps, Patty. And did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, it does. So I guess what I'm thinking about is when you have a school that says learning, social emotional learning intervention, and say you have 100 teachers, but 30 teachers are totally against it and think it won't work and don't buy in right off the bat. I'm guessing if you assess for readiness in a school, you would know who those teachers were, possibly like who are non-adopters or whatever, and then you would put extra supports in place for them. Is that am I going the wrong way with this?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at that as a great, maybe that's a better vignette to have.
Well, I don't know. It doesn't, I guess I see it regularly. So when I work with schools and I assess implementation, especially maybe after in the first 6 months, I'm often at 25 to 30% of educators who won't do it. And I'm fascinated with the idea of knowing if I could know who they were in advance, or even at that moment, they'll tell me, they're not adopting or implementing. I don't always walk toward that issue though, and work with them more. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, I know our fidelity would be better and our interventions would be more effective if we had higher implementation, right? And could work on this readiness stuff, but I only see it done so broadly, and less about individual people. But I don't know, just talking. What your thoughts, if you have any thoughts?
I love the question, and I think you're right. There is a segment of our community or culture that would be resistant to change. That's just a end all be all about it, and that's, that is hard to work with. Where do we begin? And it's kind of like that vignette. If they were in pre-contemplation or denial,
exactly,
that there's even a challenge, then why change? And so, in our small group, that's what we kind of talked about. If they don't even see a challenge, then maybe the conversation is going back to what are our goals? What is our hope that we're trying to do, and is our current path getting us there? Maybe because it's really that personal reflection on their style, is that connected to the goal of the overall goal? So I agree with you. There's a certain part of let's just use school teachers that would be resistant to thinking about new techniques. And one of the challenge we also have as a culture or climate is youth culture or student culture is changing so fast. How are our adults or service providers even able to keep up with the way that young people are evolving in relationships, communication, learning styles, and techniques? I mean, I don't even know what kids are using for social media anymore. And I'm aging myself saying that I might still use Facebook. So, those are some of the conversations that I think when we really think about change that we have to be honest about. Did anybody else want to jump in and maybe add a piece or build off that?
No, but I think it's really interesting to be thinking about, how do we leverage our effort by focusing on the resistant people, right? I've really appreciated this. I only jumped on the call in the last 25 minutes or so, but I really appreciate this idea about trying to think about how do we access community supports that are there? How do we access community involvement and passion that's in the community, so that, again, to use that wording, leveraging it, and being able to build off what's in place. And then also, Cipriano, I really liked your idea about utilizing people in the community to help augment some of the effort, right? Whether it's with the interviews, the assessment, or whatever it might be. So I really appreciate all of that. I noticed we're about 5 minutes to the end of the hour. Jennifer Coffey was really sorry to have to log off ahead of time, but I did the virtual high five on my way into the room, if you will. And I wanted to to be sure that people had a minute to enter their kind of 3 big ideas, 2 questions, and 1 action step that they might have taken from this webinar. You know, like I say, I've only been in it for 25 minutes, and I found it really engaging. As people are thinking about that, Cipriano, I also want to point out that in the 25 minutes I was here, there were a lot of resources that you shared, and that's awesome. I mean, it is a lot of resources. Watching you bounce around the different tabs on your computer and how many resources are there to access. I want to be sure that those resources get out to where people can access them. One of the questions in the chat was about a PDF you were sharing and where it's located. So maybe you could take a minute and talk about that. If you're willing to copy paste links into the chat right now, that would be good too.
What I will do is I am currently on site, but what I will do is I am going to create a page of all of the resources and give a short blurb with the links, and I will send that to Kelsey and Jennifer, and I believe that they will be able to get that out to the team. Is that fair to say, John?
Yeah, I think that's totally appropriate and fair to say. Kelsey will get them up to the website as soon as you're able to pass them on and she's able to process them. That'd be great. So anybody that's on the call, just know that you can access those.
Yes, and I'll even put the PowerPoint, because I do know Kelsey, the PowerPoint had just some more resources thinking about training and technical assistance centers that are within SAMHSA. I know that the system is so big, we don't even know where all of those programs are. So I'll just make sure that those links are easy and accessible for you guys just to do a little bit research on. They don't all pertain to maybe the focus of your guys' work, but it's always nice to have a backpack full of resources.
I agree with that entirely. You know, a giant backpack or maybe even a tool truck full of resources, right?
Exactly.
The more the better. And generalization is always good, I think, to get commingling of ideas across things. And then I see that in the chat you typed in, my brain's already organizing how to use this tool. So my 3 big ideas and questions are too much to type. I think that's probably the case for a lot of people. And so, you know, as always, feel free to unmute your microphones and let us know. And it might not be 3 big ideas. Sometimes the 1 big idea that jumps out is the most important.
Yeah, I'll make sure to give you guys the resources, and thank you for the feedback and that. I know it's always a little hard coming from one professional area of expertise and trying to connect, but I really see that this tool can be vital, and it's grassroots. That's what I really think. I'm a firm believer that the solutions are already in the communities that you guys are working with. And this is just another way to help them organize their thoughts, because sometimes when you're got your finger in all the little holes in the dike, you got to understand, where do we even begin? And I think that this is an excellent place for any organization or community just to really start to unpack, where do we begin?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you know, Cipriano, thank you for your time. I appreciate the training that I attended with you prior. You know, I'm sorry I didn't catch the full thing of that either, but you know, I really appreciate the effort that you put into these trainings and presentations and the engagement that you have with us. Again, anybody who has ideas that they'd like to add to this, we'll keep the room open for another 5 minutes if you want to put it into the chat. That, of course, helps us with SIG Network, help you all. But anything that comes in pertinent to you, Cipriano, we'll be sure to pass that along as well.
Perfect.
So go ahead.
Thank you for your time. I will cut you guys loose to do any quick briefs. And Kelsey, I will send you that email and CC Jennifer on it. And just again, thank you guys all for your guys' good work and support for young people out there. And Kelsey, if any questions do come up for me, please feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you, Cipriano.